Hey, what's up, everyone? Jeff here, also known as the Revit Kid. Welcome to another episode of BIM After Dark Live. Thank you for joining us. If you're new to the show, welcome. BIM After Dark Live is a weekly live stream here on YouTube where it's either myself and some guests, or one guest or two guests, but we just chat about all things Revit, BIM, and any really related software. So if it's your first time here, thank you for joining us. Really, I do appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the little notification button. We're actually rolled over 38,000 subscribers here on YouTube, which is pretty wild, actually. I think we started when we started this live stream, I think we were down at like 17 or 19,000. So pretty cool. Thank you. And for those of you returning and subscribers, thank you for joining me again. Cheers to you. I love doing the nighttime ones because it's more acceptable to drink. Although I know, depending on where you guys are in the world, I know we've got some people in Australia, some folks from Texas. Those of you in Texas, I'm sorry to hear what you're going through. Hopefully you guys are staying warm, safe. And if you do lose power or internet during the stream, don't worry. The replay will be available on the blog tomorrow. So I'm actually staring at 4 inches of snow right now outside of my house. It's been a nonstop snow fest here in New England as well this year. So I feel you. Look, we got a ton of people here in the chat. Awesome. Hello from Tijuana. Whoa, Tijuana. It's probably a little warmer there than it is here. I can tell you that. Atlanta. Awesome. Awesome. Great. Sorry that the sound, Chris, that the intro was a little loud. I apologize. I try to make sure all the levels are pretty adjusted, but maybe your volume was cranking. Maybe you were jamming to some tunes. Philip Chan's here. What's up, Phil? So today we're going to talk about some cool stuff. Before I jump into the sponsor of this episode and the content, I wanted to sort of introduce it just a little bit. It's kind of an interesting topic to figure out how to navigate. And so what I thought I would do is with this live setup, we have the ability to interact. As you notice, I'm always in the chat. I'm reading the chat as we go along. And so, feel free to ask questions and jump in, and I'm going to try to feed off of you guys as well. But it's one of those things where on a daily basis on my day job, where we're creating very large logistics plan and site logistics and phasing plans. We've been using a lot of Twinmotion to do that, and almost a year now of using Twinmotion to do this. We have a lot of interesting lessons learned, but also we do all of our modeling in Revit. And so what I'm going to try and do today is just sort of give you a glimpse behind the curtain of how we create these pretty large, complex scenes, and some of the lessons learned with making these beautiful aerial images, models, and scenes, but also, how it handles on the Revit side and sort of how all this interacts. And so I'm going to try to make sure this thing stays on point, but it is a topic that can go all over the place. So I welcome all of your chats, questions, and so on. But I am also going to try and keep it on point. So we'll see how that goes. Bernardo just asked, do we prefer Twinmotion over Lumion? Check out all of my previous videos. We've talked about this many times. For what I'm showing you today, which is specifically these large scale site logistics and phasing plans type of thing, and scenes where there's multiple and lots of different pieces moving and sequences and phasings going on, 100% Twinmotion. If you're talking about going down and creating a beautiful rendering of a 400 square foot house, then the competition is different, because you may not need all of these different layers and visibilities and control over, and the flexibility that Twinmotion has, and Lumion may get the job done, or Enscape. But check out, I did extensive videos last year, so check out live.bimafterdark.com to scroll through all those, and you'll see what I say about that. maybe for the year anniversary, maybe I'll do because I think the very first live stream I ever did was a real-time rendering Royal Rumble, and I sort of talked about the three major players that I think exist, which are Enscape, Twinmotion, and Lumion, and I kind of gave a little briefing on those. So maybe I'll do that again for the 1 year anniversary. We'll see. Oh man, Honolulu, Hawaii, welcome, man, or woman. Sorry, I don't know. Your username doesn't give me an idea of a gender, but welcome. Definitely jealous for that. Okay. And Susanna Duarte, how's it going? Just said, where's your last name from? And it is, my father was born in Portugal. So it is a Portuguese last name. I am Portuguese. So, all right. Before we jump into it, let's thank BIMbox, who is our sponsor. I'm going to roll the clip, and then we'll talk a little bit about BIMbox, and then we're going to jump into the content. So take a look at this awesome clip. So there you have it. BIMbox is the official sponsor of this live stream. I want to thank them for sponsoring, first of all, but I also want to let you know about BIMbox. BIMbox is exactly what it sounds like. It's a box for BIM. It is a computer, desktop or laptop. They have a couple different models, but two mainly that have been designed and optimized for Revit. So you name it, these things crank. They've got pretty much whatever you want in there, but the great thing about it is they have been designed and optimized for Revit. And if you don't believe me, you can actually go on to, if you head over to bimbox.bimafterdark.com, you can actually take they have a benchmark, and they use not just the RFO benchmark, but they have their own benchmark where you can actually compare your machine against a BIMbox. But take it from me, from using them consistently for a year now, these things fly. They can handle these, especially these very large, complex models, in Twinmotion as well, but also in Revit extremely well. So if you're looking for a new machine or a new laptop, definitely reach out to BIMbox. You can email them at sales@bimboxusa.com or head on over to bimbox.bimafterdark.com to learn more. A couple other great things about BIMbox is they all come with a 3-year warranty, and they will come delivered to your door in 10 to 14 days after you order them. Anyone who's ordered any laptops or desktops recently knows that most manufacturers will not deliver a machine that fast, especially a machine that is this fast in that fast of a time. The other thing, just to mention, everyone's probably seen what's going on right now with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency going through the roof. And because of that, graphics cards are extremely difficult to get a hold of. Anyone who's tried to build a PC right now may have realized that if you want a 3000 series GTX or NVIDIA graphics card, you can't get one. And I can tell you right now that BIMbox does have some of the 3000 series in stock. So if you want to build a desktop with those, reach out to Buck and his crew at BIMbox. So thank you for sponsoring this. You guys are amazing. We're coming up to almost a year, which is crazy to think about. And I want to thank BIMbox for supporting this show. So thank you guys. Okay, here we go. Isaiah just asked, what are you pushing in the BIMbox specs? So I'm hoping to do a detailed review of the BIMbox. I'm going to review this one back here, which is the desktop, as well as maybe in a separate video the laptop. But for right now, I'm not going to just go cranking through the specs. Just know that they're maxed out. 64 gigs of RAM. I believe this one has a 2080 or 2070 Super. The 30s didn't exist at the time. i9, I think, processor, all overclocked, all that good stuff. All right. So I'm just reading comments. And remember, this is live, so feel free to ask questions, comments as you go along. I'm going to try my best to keep up without going through content. Awesome. Looks like there's a lot of people that are interested in this large site topic, which is pretty cool. I will tell you, I saw there's a question about InfraWorks. I will tell you that the purpose of what we're doing is mainly for visualization, to some degree of accuracy. But so if you're an InfraWorks user and you're a civil engineer and stuff, this is going to be helpful. But I will tell you that we're not developing our sites to that level of detail. We have other options for that. We have done it, and we do it. But like for today's example, it's more of just managing these large files and complex phasing and so on and so forth. So let's see. Let us jump into the content. I'm sorry, I'm just reading some comments here. All right. So what I want to do is I was trying to figure out how to explain this or how to run through this. And so I have a whole bunch of examples. And so what I figured I'll do is I'll just quickly jump into one of the first examples in the Twinmotion scene, and then jump into Revit and sort of talk about how the two interact and some lessons learned. I picked two specific projects for two specific reasons. One of them is a very large site in sort of an agricultural site in eastern New York / western Connecticut. And this one's nice because it's topography, so we're using the topography tool, and there's a lot of unique things to it. And then the other one is still a little bit rural, but a little more things going on. It's a college campus. And instead of using topography, we actually use floors for all of our site stuff. And so I thought it'd be kind of interesting to just show the two on the modeling side, but then also just talk about how the two kind of interact in Twinmotion. So without further ado, let me let me jump into Twinmotion. So this is Twinmotion 2020.2, the latest build. And in full disclosure, I've got two instances of Twinmotion running and two instances of Revit running. And anyone who's used Twinmotion, and part of what I want to talk about today is ways to keep your Twinmotion files more stable. Anyone who's used Twinmotion on large scale stuff knows that if you just go at the scene willy-nilly, you can make a crashable scene. It's just, if you're not paying attention and don't have good practices, it will happen. So cross our fingers, we're live. 2 instances of Twinmotion, 2 instances of Revit. Regardless of your machine specs, doesn't actually matter when it comes to that. We could blow up, but we'll see. I have some ideas if we do blow up. Okay, so here, let me just click in here. So here's the scene actually. So hopefully you guys can see it. Pretty cool scene, right? So if I span around, you can see there's a lot. This is a big scene. If I zoom in a little here, you could see there's a lot going on in the scene. We've got a bathhouse here. We've got there's some stone walls over there. There's some cows. There's our cows. There's some horses. There's some farmhouses. There's a road here. There's trees. There's all kinds of really cool stuff, right? And then this is sort of the little main part about this agricultural campus, which is kind of like it's a barn, but for learning type of environment. It's pretty cool. But anyways, you can see there's a whole bunch of things going on. So I'm going to try and figure out how I want to sort of explain this. But I obviously, as you see things, feel free to ask. But you can see it's running pretty smooth. It looks pretty nice. And so what I'll also do is, before I jump into Revit to show you how to set up, over here there's also a bunch of cabins sort of laid out. If I spin around here, there's a river right there. Spin around here. And so there are some things happening in here. So if I spin around, just to show you kind of what's happening on the site. If I click on Building Legend, we have this cool setup here, which is more conceptual buildings with these huge notes and these huge errors to talk about the different pieces of the site. If I say construction with notes, and I zoom in a little bit, you can see there's some notes there. The construction piece is actually turned off right now, but that's okay. Let me do construction site 2. There we go. So now you can see there's a construction site happening on here, which is pretty cool. And then if I flip down here to construction site 1, you can see there's construction site with names. So there's just a lot of neat things happening in this site. And if I zoom down, you could also see there's utilities in here. Wait till you see how we created these utilities, because again, this is conceptual and much more for visual than anything else. But I'm taking advantage of the X-ray tool in Twinmotion, or the X-ray material type, which is super cool. Just to flip through some of it, and then I think back here there's a little animation of one of these cabins going in. So let me just fly back over here to you guys. I'm gonna try and move as slow as possible, knowing that there may be some bandwidth issues, but you can see there's some of those utilities, which is really neat. And then there's also prefab cabins going in. Zoom up here like that. Pretty cool, just showing an animation of these cabins going in. Okay. So wait. Isaiah just said it crashed. Did it actually crash? No, don't scare me like that. I don't think it crashed. It looks fine on my end. Hopefully it didn't. Let me know if it crashed, guys, because don't scare me like that. That's gonna scare me. Okay, so that's kind of an idea of the scene. There's some stuff going on. There's 2 construction sites that are happening. It's a large scene. There's a lot going on in it. So what I want to do now is jump into Revit and just talk about how the Revit side was set up, and then I could talk a little bit about how the Twinmotion side was set up. Yes, thank you, Bernardo and Franco and Isaiah. I do not appreciate the joke, because I can tell you right now that running two two Twinmotion instances and two Revit instances, and unfortunately the Revit versions were different, so I had to run them. Is scaring the crap out of me, so to speak. Okay, so let me jump into the Revit scene now. So check this out. Pretty cool to see them side by side. So thank you, Chris, for telling me it did not crash. Isaiah, I don't appreciate it. Okay, so if I zoom around here, you could see there's some kind of cool stuff happening. This is a large site, as you can see, and this is topography. And the reason I wanted to show this one separate from the other one is that this is using topography, right? It's sloped. It's a large sloping site on the side of a mountain, and there's topography going around, and you can see we have these sort of conceptual existing buildings. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about quickly is the topography itself. If any of you saw my previous episode where I talked about site, I'll click it in here. I think it was episode 25, actually. Wow. I'll post it in here, and I'll also post it in the links for anyone watching the replay. I talk a little bit about some of the different site tools and techniques that I have. One of them is the auto clicker, which some of you may be familiar with. And so I believe, and it's been a little while, so I don't exactly know, but I do believe that this one, we only had an image of the topography, so we did use the auto clicker to create it. For those of you that don't know about the auto clicker, I'm also posting that in the chat, and I'll put it in the description below. So the site itself was built like that. The sub-regions, most of the roads, the water down here, these are all sub-regions. And then you'll also notice I have these sub-regions over here. These represent trees, big swaths of trees. So Twinmotion has a great feature where you can scatter based on material. So I can quickly fill in this forest, using that tool very fast. The other thing that I can do is, you'll notice if I zoom in, there's these little placeholders. Okay, so when it comes to placing objects on your site, you may not need to or want to have every single object exist in your Revit model. So when it comes to trees that need to be in a very specific location, or maybe buildings or cars, anything that needs to be in a very specific location, you can actually use these placeholders to place them. So you see this one is called placeholder cabin. And so, or maybe those are trees. I don't remember. Let's see. Those must have been cabins. So those were cabins out there, or I can use these actual buildings as cabins. What you'll notice is in this model, right, these cabins are just those conceptual versions. But if I go, oops, sorry, that's the other one. But if I go into that Twinmotion scene, you'll notice that these buildings, most of them, except for the existing, if I zoom in, they've got detail to them. Right? These are actual building models. And so depending on your project and how, look at this one here with the glass. It looks so cool. That looks so neat. There's nothing cooler. By the way, if you guys haven't tried Twinmotion, probably my favorite part about it is just having quality materials and lighting and then just orbiting around. There's just something great about the feeling of the smoothness and the look of orbiting around a model with these beautiful reflections and stuff. Anyways, so you'll notice there's a lot of detail in this cabin. But if I go to my Revit model, it looks like this. And so depending on your scene and depending on what you're trying to do, it may not make sense to model or have all of your models in these locations. For us personally, I was building the site model while someone else was building all of these buildings. So what we decided to do was say, we'll just use these as placeholders. And in Twinmotion, you can just flip out if you load it incorrectly, and I do believe I have a tutorial on this too. You can actually just flip out one object for another object. So if you load in the cabin, I can flip it out for one of these placeholder cabins. So the cabins themselves, for example, if I go over to 3D, here is one of those models, with the base point being the same base point as the cabinets. Obviously, you could link them in as well, and we'll show you in the next project that you can have them linked in. But this was kind of a nice workaround for us because while someone was cranking through building all these little buildings, I was able to build the site, and then all we had to do was in Twinmotion, all we had to do was flip them out. Okay. Somebody just asked, Chris just asked, is Twinmotion free for students? I believe it is. If you head on over to the website, you have to fill out some forms. I don't know for sure. Junior just said we have to watch the Twinmotion site live. Yep, definitely check that one out. Okay, awesome. Just making sure I catch up with your chat. There was probably like a 6 to 10 second delay, so I'm trying to make sure I'm keeping up. Okay. So that was kind of cool. This was, again, these are different approaches, and something's going to work for you that may not work for other people, but it worked for us for this example. So then within each one of these imports, I could bring in the cabins as their own and control them, but then I could also control the visibility of it. So what that allowed me to do too was on this building legends portion, which I thought was pretty neat. We're showing new buildings, renovations, and existing, right? So red is to be demolished, pink is new, and white is, or pink is renovation, I think, and white is new, or maybe white was renovation, whatever. Existing to remain there. And so without having to use all those crazy detailed models, now from far away you have this beautiful sort of key plan that works through your site. And somebody I think asked about how we colored these. This is actually just a mass in Revit, and so it's kind of hard to see there, but these are just masses that we drew in Revit and we exported on their own. One of the coolest things, and so if I turn this on and off, you can see there it is there. I'm a little nervous to isolate it because sometimes it does some weird stuff right now, but you can see that. So one of the really nice things about using Twinmotion with Revit side by side without using, let's say, the link, is that you can just create things and then isolate them and export them and bring them in as their own individual objects, right? I'm sorry, I'm just reading here. Let's see. People are just talking about the Twinmotion pricing and a few other things. Dave just mentioned that Twinmotion does have the Unreal Engine features, which puts it in a different class. Yes, and if you're interested in Unreal and the relationship, there is a beta out there for the connection between Twinmotion and Unreal, and the line is getting more blurred, which is pretty sweet. Okay, so what I was saying before is you can isolate things. So for example, if I go to inside site, you'll see this right here. This is just an isolated piece of dirt and fencing. So in order to reduce the size of my Twinmotion file, instead of bringing in an entire new site to show that construction happening, all I have to do is bring in the dirt and the fencing, and it can come in as its own model. So if I go back to construction site 2, actually I think that was construction site 1. Yeah. You'll see now instead of bringing in an entire site, I have construction site 2 and construction site 1. I have them as their own imports. So what's nice about that is if you refresh something, you don't have to refresh everything, which anyone who's dealt with Twinmotion knows that. You can, if you're using large sites like this, I could tell you one lesson learned is as much as possible, if I zoom it all the way out, right, you could see, look at all the trees, right? All the trees, all this context, all the stuff around it, the stone walls, the trees, the rocks, all this stuff, even the animals, right? The cows and the horses, all that stuff. Those are probably not going to change all that much. So if I'm making a lot of changes to the site, as much as possible, I'm going to make sure that I don't have to refresh that entire world, right? So think about your models as in a big site, smaller sites, and how you can manage it so that you're not refreshing everything. So for example, right, that I showed you that construction site. So if this fencing changes, which anyone who's ever dealt with construction management and fencing and planning a site knows that there's nothing that changes more than fencing. The fact that we even put it on paper is amazing when you think about how much it changes. But I can refresh this, and all it's doing is refreshing the dirt and the fence instead of the dirt, the fence, and every other aspect of the site. And I promise you, just by doing that alone and thinking with that mentality, you're going to create a more stable Twinmotion scene. Some of the biggest crashes I've ever had were because I was trying to refresh a whole scene that also included all of these trees and people and plants and cars with them. Okay. I'm just checking to see. I see there's a bunch of Joe Buchek asked if it's the Appalachian Trail. Actually, it may be. I'll double check that. I actually don't know if it is, but it may actually be. Trying to see it on a map there, it may actually be close to it. Dave also mentioned menu management. So this project isn't a great example of menu management. So I'll show you in the next project a good example of menu management. I also noticed that you guys didn't see what I was clicking down here. So down here on the right, what I've been clicking is scene states. So this is what's great about this with Twinmotion is that you can save any scene state you want. So you can turn anything off by material, by object, by individual piece, whatever you want, and then you can save that as a scene state, which is a great way to control phasing or even like notes and stuff. So like this building logistics one or building legend one, you could see that's a scene state. And so I turn on this import here, which is called site area callouts. I turn that on, and that's what actually does the views there. All right, so let me bring myself back here. Okay, perfect. So this let me just pull out to construction with notes. Okay, so a couple tips on this one. The first one is what I just mentioned there, which is bringing in the entire site and then bringing in pieces of it that you know are going to change. So maybe your building site within the entire site, even if it's not construction, let's say it's architecture, even bringing in your building site separate as an import from your overall context site is probably a good idea. The place that you know is going to change a lot, you may want that to be its own import. Then you can refresh it without other stuff happening. So that's a key there. As far as just site modeling, as I mentioned, check out that post. But everything from the fences here to the stone walls, if I go over here, stone walls, whoa, sorry, just went in the lily pads, to the stone walls, to even the utilities, those are all using railings. The fencing, all using railings. And so check out that previous post, but if I jump back into here, you could see this is railings. And the reason I'm using railings there is because it follows topography, right? And so if I zoom in, see this railing right here? This railing is actually following the topography, and so is this railing here, right? So you're just drawing lines and you're letting it follow topography. Same thing here. See this guy? I know it looks crazy in Revit, but this is just a wall it's called stone wall 2, but it's actually just a railing. So if I go to edit path, check this out. Oops, there it is. See that? It's just a line. So I just drew a line like this, right? But then it's hosted to the surface of the topo. So now it does that. Okay, so then when I bring it into Twinmotion with some quality materials, and because we're zoomed out pretty far, you can see I dumped some real rocks on top of it just to make it look blown up. But if I zoom in here a little bit, you can see that's all it is. It's just a rock wall just like that. This obviously doesn't look that great up close because we're not going to be up close. But from way back here, it looks like a rubble wall, which is pretty sweet. All right, I saw a couple questions in there before we jump in. Is my forest low poly? Nope, my forest is 100% Twinmotion trees. So if I zoom all the way in, you can see. I will tell you that this scene was actually done in the beta of 2020, and I just opened it this morning in the new version. So some of the trees didn't fully come through correctly, but those are actual 100% Twinmotion trees. So they are high poly. And then Dave also asked, are you remapping all materials? Yes. So for the sake of reality and looking more realistic in Twinmotion, we usually just go with making sure our naming conventions make sense, and then mapping all the materials in Twinmotion. One thing I will add with materials, for those of you not familiar with Twinmotion, is there's a little setting on materials called Grunge, and it's one of those things where it can get overused a little bit if you use it in specific scenes. But for big landscape like this, Grunge is your friend. So if I click, I'm going to T on my keyboard for materials, and then I'm going to click my grass, and I'm going to go under more, and I'm going to turn off all the grunge and show you the difference. All right, so see the grass now, and even the pavement. Let me turn off on the pavement too. Okay, let me go to more, turn that down. Okay, so now the scene, right? If you're looking at it, it starts looking a little gross, and you start seeing the repetitiveness of the material for the grass, right? But now if I click here and I turn on that grunge material, see that? I actually used it around 80 for that. And then I'm going to click it on the asphalt. Look at the asphalt there. Hopefully you can see it from here. I'm going to crank that up. Now look at the difference. It has this way of sort of breaking up textures and really making scenes feel and look more realistic. So do not be afraid of using the grunge material. That's another nice little tip from this scene. how to make the text legends. The text themselves is a note in Twinmotion. So these are called call out notes. If I click this guy, you could see this is just a note that you can push and pull around. The text legend for the building legend, those are actually model text in Revit. For some reason, I must have opened the wrong Revit file. It doesn't have these in it. But this is just those are text in Revit that were brought in on their own. So if I click here, area callouts, you can see there's on and off. Uh-oh, that one might have done it. Hold on. Okay. I'm gonna let Twinmotion come back a little bit. So a couple questions in there. Did you add trees in Revit first? No, I didn't, but you can if you wanted to. So what I did there is I used the material as I showed in the beginning of the lesson. And actually, I could jump back in while Twinmotion is blowing up in the background. Oops, sorry, I just hit subscribe on you guys. Okay. While Twinmotion is blowing up in the background, I'll quickly show you. So for trees, as I mentioned, I have a big material, and these areas here, these are called forests. And so you can actually scatter trees on those materials. If you want very specific locations of trees, you can use objects and you can replace them. And for that, I'll actually quickly post a link to my replace objects tutorial to show you exactly how to do that. Here we go. I'm just posting that in the chat right now. All right. So that's how you would replace objects like trees and cars, which I'll show you in the next example. I should probably just jump into the thing. So Dave Vaughn just said trees will crash Twinmotion. Yes, and so this is why it's important. This is why I was stressing the idea of your context and trying to figure out what exactly you need to refresh. So when you have a site with multi-phase, or maybe it's a site where you want to show 5 options in the same scene, you really want to figure out what actually needs to refresh, because I've seen the most issues when if you have that big forest of trees like I had and then you refresh that entire forest, that's when you can start running into issues. Because if you think about it, there may be 60,000 trees that are hosted to that surface, and that surface is getting refreshed. So they're either going to disappear or weird stuff is going to happen. And so that's why when you think about it, trying to figure out how to place the trees and then never have to touch them again, especially when it comes to the big context ones, is huge. It's a huge example. So Dave just mentioned using the proxy. Yeah. So I just posted an example to the proxy objects there. So what I'm going to do is I think. Oh, there we go. Okay. I think hopefully you guys can still see me. Let me know if you can still see me. But oh man, Twinmotion just went nuts. You guys missed it. It was great. Okay, so I'm gonna jump over to the other scene real quick, and then we can talk about some of the placeholder objects and how that worked. And so let me just jump into this. The other Twinmotion instance is open. I don't know if it's frozen or not. I'm not even gonna go back to it, but this one's working right now, so we're just gonna roll with it. Okay, so this is the other scene, which is pretty cool. You can see it's a pretty large scale. If I zoom out a little bit, it's actually a college campus. So let me zoom out some more. And so you can see there's some existing buildings, some hockey, some soccer fields, and then an existing parking lot here. Okay, so a perfect example of proxy objects are these cars right here. Placing these cars, especially if this was an angle or like a radius or something, is a nightmare. And there's no reason to manually place these if you don't have to. So what we use in these scenes is we actually use proxy objects. So if I go to the Revit model now of this exact scene, hopefully, cross our fingers. I'm asking a lot of Revit now. Okay, so if I go to site complete, how are you handling striping? Great question, Dave. I also have a tutorial for that. So those are railings too, believe it or not. Okay, so I'm going to show you that right now in Revit, and I'll also post a tutorial to that, or the link to that tutorial as well. Striping. Here we go there. It's pretty funny. I have a tutorial for that, and that, and that, and that. I just posted a link in the chat. I'll also post it in the description for those of you that are not watching it live. But okay, let me just jump into this. Perfect. Okay, so let me turn off. Let me find the image that I want to go to. Existing inside. Okay, here we go. So remember how I mentioned, bringing out the inside of the site, the part that's going to change separate from the rest of it. So check this out. If I go to this scene, you'll notice here, this is a nice comprehensive scene. But if I take you through the actual phasing of this job, so I'm going to quickly do that. Here's trailer and temp walls over here, or trailer and temp power. Here's fencing, so we're starting to add some fencing, right? Then we go down to excavation. And now you can see there's excavation. So this gives you an idea of the extent of the site now. Okay, if I zoom in a little more, you can start to see it, right? So you'll notice the rest of the site has not changed. So in order to make the scene more stable and manageable, you could see this is kind of what I was exporting separate from the rest. So the exterior, everything around it came in as one model, and then this piece on the inside came in as another model. So then I can do dirt, I can do excavation, I can do parking, I can do the final build, all those things I can change, refresh, update without affecting all of my context around it. So that's extremely important. As far as striping, you can see if I zoom in here, these stripes are actually railings, and you can check out that tutorial I just posted there. Including right here, you can see this is all just railings. These are floors. We kept everything flat. So the reality is we didn't need to use railings, but the railings make it easier than extrusions or more floors, right? So once you start getting used to the striping idea, it's actually not that bad. I will not take full credit for this. A colleague of mine, Derek, did all of this modeling for this project, minus some miscellaneous crap. So I'll let him tell you if it was a pain in the ass striping this one. But I could tell you using the railing tool definitely makes it a lot easier and a lot more digestible. So there's existing inside the site. But now let's talk really quickly about the building itself, because I do want to touch on that before we end. So what you'll notice is that this building, so this is a hockey rink actually. So this building, and I think this is one of the older designs. So if the architect's out there, I'm sorry, this is still the older scene. I didn't want to open the new one. So as you can see, the excavation is there. There's a foundation, right? And use this idea even for like architecture, if you're just showing different options. Instead of bringing in entire pieces of the building to show it being built, for example, or maybe if you're going to show like a facade, let's say, instead of bringing in the entire building once and then bringing in the entire building again with a different facade, only bring in what you need to change so that you don't have to bring in two instances of that giant complex building. So this, for example, you could see here's the excavation, right? If I hit structure, right, there's the structure. Now, you could see these have trusses, these have bracing. There's a lot going on in this, right? And so this kind of stuff with all these polygons, this will start deteriorating your scenes because these are real-time rendered scenes, right? It's polygon, it's meshes, it's all that good stuff. So you want to minimize it as much as possible. So when I go to structure 2, right, most people's natural instinct is to set up this view of the building in Revit showing the entire structure with some of the walls, with some of the pieces of roof on it, and export that entire thing, right, as a new instance in Twinmotion. What I'll show you here is if I go into Revit imports, I actually have these brought in as their own individual pieces. So steel 2, see that? Steel 1, and then foundations. So I'm actually just turning on the sequences of those. So now I'm not doubling, tripling, or quadrupling the models in my scene. And so in Revit, the way I'm doing that, and again, this is for construction phasing, but the reality is, if you think about a facade, for example, there's no reason to bring in the entire building to show 3 different facade designs. Only bring in the pieces that need to change and bring everything else once, right? So if I go through this, if I go to foundation, you can see there's my foundation plan. If I go to structure 1, I just have a section box that's cut at the perfect location. And then structure 2, it starts at the exact same location. Oops, I don't know why that went to. Right, starts at the exact same location and it fills the rest in. So, and then facade start, you could see, then I just bring in pieces of the facade. This is actually a newer model, so I apologize for that. And then facade finish, I'm only bringing in some of the rest of the facade, right? So bringing in one half, bringing in the next half. So that's huge, right? and it doesn't matter what machine you have. Like, this is just the nature of the software itself. You want to reduce the number of polys as much as possible. So if I had this structure in here 17 times, you're just 17 timesing the resources needed for it for absolutely no reason. So that's probably one of the biggest things I will tell you for keeping scenes small, is not duplicating polys for absolutely no reason. Okay. So let me just finish this phasing for you guys so you can see it, because it's kind of cool. If I go to structure 2, if I go to final parking lot work, so now the building's being, actually this is the new version of the building. So if JCJ, if you guys are out there, I got the new building in here. So now you can see we're doing some things like showing the final parking. Here's the striping that you can see there, but you'll notice that it's all happening inside that that individual area, right? So none of these trees had to get redone. Every time I refresh this, and I could tell you this thing changed a lot already, it wasn't refreshing anything around the context, okay? Okay, so now, and then I can go to complete, just so you can see the complete scene. So with the complete, you could see there's a lot of parking and cars and stuff here. So these I also used placeholders. So if I zoom in really quickly to Revit, and if I can remember, where the heck I had these things saved, let me go back out while it's happening. Chris just asked what arena this is. I'm not going to say the name of it, but it's a new hockey arena that's being built on a campus here in Connecticut. I'm sure if you read close enough, you'll find it. Junior just asked, Christopher just asked, is the construction equipment part of Twinmotion, Revit, or something else? Good point. So I'll jump into Twinmotion in a second and show you. It's a mix bag between Twinmotion and numbers of other areas. But real quickly before I get off of it, I do want to talk about the site walls here. So let me just flip this. And I know I said I would talk about phasing, and so this is not going to be it's already 8:12, so it's already whatever. So this wasn't meant to be a detailed look into phasing. I do plan on doing more detailed look into the actual phasing part of Revit. But what I did want to talk about is how we manage phases in these different types of scenes. And so what you'll notice there is I just flipped from construction to new construction. So in this particular model, we actually have existing construction and new construction. But then and that's only because I needed to make the intermediate phase for some specific reasons. A lot of times, honestly, what we will do is we will use design options to manage our phases because of the fact that we're using large site things. It doesn't really make a big difference. They're overlapping each other. The biggest issue with design options for that is usually hosting to site objects. But you can see here, for example, my construction fencing is a design option. I know you can't see that, so let me just move my head. So over here, I have 3 different fence locations. So if I say fence position 1, you could see, of course, it's under construction. So we'll back out of that for a second. But what I did want to show you is all the placeholder cars. I moved these by accident up when I was doing something, but you could see I have these objects here that are proxy objects. And so now I can quickly fill in this scene with placeholder cars and then bring those into Twinmotion and flip them out using that tutorial that I just posted for all those cars there. Instead of click, 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 and randomizing and doing all this cool stuff. But you know, that's a really quick, easy way to jump into it. So before I move on, I do want to answer your question. Who was that asked? Was it Junior? No, it wasn't Junior. Sorry. Christopher. Christopher asked about construction equipment. Okay, let me jump into excavation. Okay, so this is actually a mixed bag of Twinmotion, which has some great construction equipment. So I'll zoom in close to these, even though these scenes aren't meant to be zoomed into. Remember, I mean you can, but so like this, for example, this dump truck here. There's some excavators. There's a bunch of really nice Twinmotion equipment, but there's things that aren't in Twinmotion. And so like this, for example, the concrete pump truck is not. And so this excavator, this demolition excavator is not. These are. And this lull is not, for example. So the way we pull those in is we actually have our own library that we've created over time using various sources. TurboSquid, buying libraries, and whether they're 3D Max or something like that. Dare I say on this channel, but the SketchUp warehouse, whatever's left of it, we pulled some models off of there in the past, and we bring them in. Some Revit families, some 3D Max, some Blender, wherever. The nice thing about Twinmotion is that you can bring them all into one location. So you can use proxy objects, or you can just place them manually. I will give you a tip when bringing in from other programs. If you are bringing in an FBX from TurboSquid, then you're good to go. You're bringing an FBX directly in there. Sometimes they're pretty high poly, so be careful with that. The one thing that we do for bringing in SketchUp models is, you'll notice if I click this, it's actually an individual mesh and not 1,000 different things. And then if I go over here to my user library, I have, under machinery, I have all of these pieces of machinery that are ready to go. And so the way we do that is we don't bring in SKP files. For anyone who's used Twinmotion, you know that it has the ability to bring them in. We export them as FBXs. We bring them in as collapsed objects, so they come in as one mesh. We add materials, and then we add them to our library. Then we delete that import from our scene. This is another stability thing, okay? If you bring in a SketchUp file or a 3D Max file into your scene every time you need to place a pump truck, for example, you're loading instances of a referenced object, and then you're multiplying it multiple times across the scene. That is disaster waiting to happen. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're actually creating a library from these objects that are individual meshes. There's not 1,000 things, and they're not looking for referenced objects, and that's key. Okay, so what you'll notice is if I go to my imports on Twinmotion, all these imports here, the only thing that's imported into this project is my Revit export backgrounds, things that are going to change, right? Those are the only imports. Not a single piece of equipment is an import. It's part of my library. Okay, so huge thing if you guys, and this again, this is just for construction equipment, but if you're a residential architect, and or maybe healthcare, and you're bringing in a lot of healthcare objects from TurboSquid or something like that, that's a good tip, is to create them, bring them in, even if you do them in their own scene, apply materials, save the mesh to your library, and then delete the export or the import and only use it from your library. I promise you, you will get more stable and smaller scenes too, is another thing. Awesome. Let's see, Sabusio, sorry. What to do if 2018 Revit fails to upgrade when importing? Not sure what you're saying there. This actually, one of the last scene I showed you was in Revit 2018. I think you're talking about if Revit 2018 fails to upgrade to another version, maybe. I'm not really sure what you're asking there, but if your Revit fails to upgrade to another version, then just keep it in the other version if you have it and try to use it. But you've got some bigger issues than importing it into Twinmotion. Okay, let's see. John Gray just asked, is there a mapping interface for Revit materials to TM? Yes, there is to some extent. I guess it depends on what you mean by a mapping interface. I will tell you from experience that I usually just end up redoing the materials. So if you know that from the start and you're never going to use the Revit rendering engine, for example, then it's probably okay for you to not even apply textures in Revit and just use material names with colors and shaded views, and then do all the texturing in Twinmotion, which is a tip. I also see that my video feed is starting to freak out, so I wonder if I should try to close any of these in the background here. Okay. What are my light settings? All right, cool. That's a good question, and I will jump into that. And Newton just said 120 people watching and only 27 likes. Yeah, guys, like it. Come on. YouTube loves likes in the algorithm. Before I jump into the light settings, Itar Arc asked if I recommend Live Link. Personally, I don't use the Live Links, Lumion or Twinmotion. For me personally, I like exporting and memorializing that moment in time, building my scenes, and then refreshing if I need it. Mainly because I'm not using these as, let's say, a real-time design tool, so to speak. They're more like production at the end. And I am still kind of using Enscape as that real-time design tool, which kind of has that real-time connection. I just personally, I like the ability of saying, check it here, pull it out, do your scene, and then if you need updates, you go back and you do it. Keeping both open and refreshing and stuff, as I mentioned with the whole refresh thing, it can make it pretty challenging. So depending on what you're doing, Depending on what you're doing, maybe it makes sense for you. Personally, for me, the live link for either programs has never ever really made sense. Okay, so what I'm going to do is for the OBS didn't like that. Man, these two versions of Twinmotion is freaking my computer out. I love it. I was really concerned about doing that, and I actually tried closing the other version, but it's the other scene is like stuck. Another good tip for Twinmotion, by the way, is when something seems like it's stuck, just wait. It's one of those programs where like it'll bog down for a second, but if you just give it a few minutes, it magically comes back. Don't immediately Control Alt Delete and freak out. Just give it a minute, and it actually usually comes back, which is pretty sweet. Okay, so real quick, the light settings. This is probably this scene right here is probably one of my favorite light settings, and so I'll run through them quickly. But what I'll also do is I'll take snips of it and I'll put them in the blog post tomorrow, so you don't have to furiously write down. But I'll run through them really quickly. Another thing to mention before I jump into lights, let me go to the complete, because I think that's probably the best one where you see lights. This is probably one of my favorite for aerial views. This light setting for this scene just looks the most realistic to me. It looks phenomenal. But I will also add that the trees you use are really important. I live in Connecticut. This project is in Connecticut, so it's New England. So we do have a very specific type of trees around here. I know if you live somewhere else, maybe this doesn't make sense. But I will tell you that some look way better in aerial views than others. And so just quickly before I jump into lights, I will talk about the trees. There's only 3 trees being used in this entire scene, in most of my scenes. And one is the Western Red Cedar. So you see I just clicked it here. And then the other 2 are the European Beech and the Laurel. So Laurel, European Beech, and what was it, the Western Red Cedar? Western Red Cedar. Those are the only 3 trees I'm using this entire scene. And I promise you, it doesn't seem like that makes a difference, but when it comes to the hues, the saturation, the colors, and the leaves of the trees, that can make a scene look really, really goofy. So just a little tip there. Maybe it doesn't work for you, but only choose a certain number of trees. Don't go bizarre with trees. Don't go nuts with the trees. Okay. So light settings. Twinmotion's freezing. Hold on. I'll check out some chat while it's coming back. Remember I said wait for it to come back? It's going to come back, I promise. We actually had a Zoom call where we were presenting a scene like this, and it did that too, where it was loading something really fast, and it took a second, and so I just jumped off and stopped screen sharing and talked for a little bit, and then came back when it came back. So that's what I'm doing to you guys. And look at that, it came back. See? Boom, man. Okay. Real quick, I do see and that's David just made a good point. I clicked the tree groups, which is probably what did a huge spike. I will tell you for Twinmotion, what I've noticed, and I don't know if this is true, maybe the developers can answer to this, but something like that makes a massive RAM spike, which then flattens out, and that's what freezes things. There's like a huge RAM spike. I don't know. Either way. So light settings. Real quickly, if I go into my settings here. Okay, so go to location real quick. You can see time of day. I have it 10:45 in the morning. I didn't even put this in the right location. This is in Paris, which is kind of funny, but 10:45 in the morning. I have it set for April, and I'll move my face out of the way so you guys can see it all. And it's the north offset is 301. That's not nearly as important, but the April and time of day is helpful. That'll have an effect on the scene as well. So that's your localization settings. The weather, I almost always have just a hint of clouds on. So for aerial scenes, it doesn't seem to make a difference. If I look up, you can see the clouds. If as you can see here, there's no clouds. If you move it over just a little bit, you get a hint of clouds. It doesn't seem to make a difference, but but what it'll do is it'll start adding a little variation on the ground because of the shadows from the clouds. So definitely recommend you do that. If I go under effects on the right here, don't really mess with these too much. Sometimes, depending on the scene, I might crank up the smog. You can see this is at 26%, which is not too much. Lighting. Exposure, -0.5. Okay. If I go under more, I'm keeping auto exposure. If you start messing with night scenes and different dramatic lighting, you may want to turn off auto exposure. I'm leaving it on. So I have my exposure at -0.5. My white balance is 8400K. I have global illumination on. My shadow settings depends on your scene. Play with the distance you need for your shadows, so that shouldn't affect the look. And then I think these are all mostly existing, but my lighting is sun intensity is all the way up. Sun reflection is 0.92, stars is 1, moon intensity is 1.5, And then ambient is 0.98. Remember, I'm going to snip all these and put them in the blog post tomorrow, but I did want to run through them because you did ask. And then if I go under, oops, sorry, let me back out here. And then if I go under camera, you can see I'm using a 60 millimeter lens. Depending on what it is that you're doing, that may make sense, may not. I have 50% vignetting, which isn't a ton, but it adds a little something to the ends. And then notice I obviously don't have depth of field or parallelism on. Visual effects. Here's where some of the stuff happens. Under color gradient, this is huge. I have 65% contrast and 32% saturation. I've mentioned this in numerous other live streams. In general, to me, scenes look more realistic when you have higher contrast, lower saturation. Just sort of a rule of thumb. And so this is all personal preference, but if you like the looks of it, I'm going to run through it. So 65% contrast, 32% saturation. I have no visual filters on here, so the type is none. Then if I go under filters, I do have line light on. This doesn't make a huge difference in aerials, but what it does do is it gives you little edges when you need them. So definitely something to turn on. As you get closer to objects, you notice it more, but it will add edges during exports and stuff. So totally worth it. Reflections, SSR is on, and that's really it. I don't think there's anything else to talk about in settings. Let me see. Yeah. So not a hugely dramatic setup. But also materials and trees make a difference. That grunge on the ground that I mentioned before, the trees, the tree types themselves, all that stuff makes a huge difference to how realistic these scenes look. Okay. Ryan just asked what your camera settings are. I think I answered that. Yeah. Salutes from Argentina and Brazil. What's up, guys? ACAD Gatsu got here late. You'll be able to see the replay. Don't you worry. All right, so I'm just checking to make sure there's no questions here. Dave just said shadows are mapped. Yeah. So the shadow distance. What happens with the shadow distance is that you want to set the distance so that you see all of the shadows in your scene. So that may change depending on where your scene is, but you'll play with that when you jump into Twinmotion. You guys will see that. All right. Whew. Yeah. I think I might have to end up here. My throat's getting a little dry. I've been on Zoom calls all day, and I did a couple lessons last night, so I am beat. You guys had amazing questions. This was awesome. Make sure you subscribe subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. Hit the notification bell. Give me a like, thumbs up, all that cool stuff. Comment. What I'm going to do is all the links I mentioned today will be in the description here on YouTube, but I'll also post this on the blog at therevitkid.com or bimafterdark.com. Either one will get you there. Tomorrow, so take a look out for that. Yeah. Amazing. You guys are awesome. I hope this was helpful. I know this was a lot of content. If there's something a part of this that you want to dig into more, feel free to reach out to me and let me know, and I'll do an episode on it. The other thing I didn't mention is if you are interested or you know someone who would be interested on being a guest, head on over to submit.bimafterdark.com and you can submit, and I'll see it, and maybe you'll have a great idea that we can all share with the world. So yeah, more whiskey. Yes, Dave. more port wine. Port wine is definitely not helping with a dry voice, but awesome, guys. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. I'm amazed Twinmotion did not crash on me with 2 instances, 2 versions of Revit. I'll see you guys next week. Feel free to reach out. Hit me up on Twitter at the Revit Kid. You're amazing. Stay safe. And I'll see you guys next week. So with that, I want to bid you adieu, and I'll see you guys soon.